recording. Did everyone view the video, the two videos?
I don't know how we can answer for everyone, but yeah, some of us did.
Okay. What are your thoughts on it?
First of all, yeah, I like your choice of words. It's impeccable. The understanding is clear, but okay, from the qualitative, there's somewhere you mentioned that you could even, okay, from data collection, you said you could even do a lot of video graphics,
yes,
recording. Yeah. So
yes.
that made me wonder, yeah, if I came up with a video documentary of about 45 minutes or an hour as my research,
Yes.
can it count?
It can. Okay. One of the things we have to note with qualitative research design, we must have multiple sources for the case of validity. So it isn't just the one video alone, but it's part of. It's part of. So you would have, let's say, a video, you would have an interview, you would also, you'd have several, you should have multiple methods, multiple research tools. You should have used multiple research tools to emphasize your point that you've brought the holistic view of that particular phenomena. Let's just have an example. Let us say you're doing a qualitative study on adoption. What is it that would, what are those factors that would, let us say, motivate a user to adopt a particular application or system or any artifact? You may start with observation. What you observe, you report. Maybe those who seem to have adopted this system are people of this category, this particular maybe academic background, this particular age group, you know, those simple things. Then you may sit down with somebody some of the participants, and you have a discussion, maybe a focus group discussion. Then you may do a video recording of maybe participants doing training or actually using the system in their day-to-day work, and you take note of the challenges here and there, issues that as they go along. And so all those tools, you use them to bring out those factors that are influencing. So you'd use, for example, that's what we refer to as triangulation, where you're using multiple methods to, should I say, to bring out all the aspects of your research or all aspects of to demonstrate what you have discovered. And when you do that, you bring a holistic view. Because remember, ultimately, the qualitative research is exploring, is coming into an area which is unknown, which is quite opposite to quantitative research, which is coming in to prove or disprove something. So you may only be looking at one or two aspects of a phenomena.
Yeah, I hear you, but you know, I just personally feel nothing speaks more than a picture. You know, they say picture has over 1,000 words.
Yes.
Just a picture, because of the evidence and all that stuff. So what can be more conclusive than you? Okay, let's give an example. I want to study about a particular tribe that is unknown. Yeah.
Yes.
And I want to let people know. So I go with my documentary, with my video, with my camera, and then I blend in, I become a part of them, they trust me, and I record everything that I'm talking about.
Yes.
Like from the source itself, like first leave alone the written reports and all that stuff. Like I have the documentary well made.
Yes.
Okay, maybe the ones I can relate to, these ones you see on National Geographic, they go into those details and you feel you're actually there. So I'm still wondering, how can it not pass as its own? Because I feel a documentary in itself, in its standalone as a documentary, should pass as research on its own.
Now, the documentary would be your source of data, but after you've gotten the data, you have to analyze it and make meaning out of it in relation to your research question. The documentary can serve as part of your primary data. What do I mean? Let me see if I can just pull out a page and I show you just something, a snippet, and you see what I am referring to. Just give me a minute. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it can be good.
Yeah. So now, this is just a chapter, the 6th chapter in my thesis. If you look at this title, Ownership and Maintenance of Mobile Phones, this was a theme that came out of the findings I had. How did that theme emerge? One, it was from things that were said by respondents. You see this quote here, this is something that was actually said by somebody during an interview. Then in another situation, another respondent stated this. Yeah. Then we move on. Then during a survey, also this information came out about use of a phone. Yeah. About use of personal phones and household phones, and there are people who use their neighborhood's phone, their neighbor's phone. There are others who use a phone that is generally available in the household. And here is another image which I had. This was an image from a mobile literacy class we had with a community. So you realize to come out with that theme, I had to bring several things from several points of view. So what am I saying? The documentary, you may have a documentary, but your documentary becomes a source of primary data. So you would pull out snippets of it, maybe from an interview, an image, whatever it is, to come up with a theme. Yeah. So the documentary alone cannot come up with a theme. When you're carrying out analysis, after you've collected your data, you come up with themes. And these themes more or less later on become sort of like a hypothesis for some kind of theory. So what I'm basically saying, that documentary, it would be rich with data. What you would see it as a source of rich data, which you then use to come up with themes during your analysis. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. So it would become a primary data, raw data that you then use carry on for analysis. Any thoughts from others? Let me come to the qualitative side, and I'm just going to share my screen again, and let us look at validating your research in quantitative data. Do we have any question on that? Did we understand the systematic variance? Did we understand any of those?
No.
No. Okay. Let us say we want to prove, we would like to prove we want to prove the should I say we want to prove the quality of service given by an iPhone versus a Techno. Yeah? Can anyone picture something like that? Or we'd like to prove if the IQ levels of 20 of a group of 20-year-olds versus a group of 3-year-olds. Because here we're dealing specifically with quantitative research. Imagine you're going to put something to the test in an experimental lab. Yes? Imagine you're going to put something to the test in an experimental lab. Now, within the lab, you have what we call a controlled environment. And more specifically, when you're looking at quantitative research, you are comparing two or more variables, one which is independent, the other which is dependent. The causal effect of one thing against another. Yeah, the causal effect of one thing against another. So let us say you're trying to compare the causal effect of an application a particular application with a certain group of people and versus another set of people, because you want to prove this up, you want to prove or disprove whether this application was built to the best standards, maybe in terms of usability and usefulness. Okay, usability and usefulness. So the two groups of people, at the end of it, you don't want any interference to come into play. You don't want any interference to distort your results. You want validity, that at the end of it, at the end of that result, you want to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this application is actually has been designed to the best of its ability. So let me just give you the example of the iPhone. Let me just give the example of the iPhone. Already, by simply comparing an iPhone and a Techno, you're completely far off, because these two, in terms of quality, are completely not in the same league. Yeah, they're really not in the same league. Maybe we can compare an iPhone to one of the high-end Samsungs. Those two can go head to head, and we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt whether the iPhone has the best quality of service ever. No, that kind of comparison. I saw in another article where one engineer maybe wants to test the quality of his machine versus a Toyota, on quality of his high-speed machine versus a Toyota, and the other one tests it against a Ferrari. Now, if everyone knows, a Ferrari engine is built for speed, but a Toyota may not be built for speed. So the two, that is essentially, the result is going to be null and void. It can't be proved that the machine you have built is truly a high-speed engine. So when we talk about systematic variance, yeah, we want that's maximizing systematic variance. We want to ensure that it's a fair comparison between the two. Yeah, it's a fair comparison between the two. Let me go ahead and also give another example. Let us say we want to determine, let me not talk about IQ. Let me talk about classroom performance in a well-resourced school versus, we want to prove, let's say we have a hypothesis that a school, these private schools which have all available resources to them, will lead to improved performance in class, as opposed to a school with limited or no resources, which would have lower performance. Yeah, imagine those two scenarios. Can all of you imagine those two scenarios? Yeah.
Yes, doctor. Yes.
Two scenarios. We have a group of students who are coming from a school with all available resources. They have well-qualified teachers available. They have a good student ratio, student-teacher ratio, a good student resources ratio. That means they have all resources. I mean, there are enough textbooks in the library. They have computers connected to the internet, and they have all available e-resources. They have good, sufficient lunch, feeding available to them, and so on and so forth. Then you have another situation where you have a group of students who come from a school with limited or no resources. The student to teacher ratio is extremely high. That means you have many students and maybe only in comparison to the teachers, maybe it's 100 students per class. Their meals are not, they may have meals, but maybe poorly supplied or poor food or whatever it is. They have no or limited access to computers, maybe no access to internet. Maybe their teachers are not that well qualified, and so on and so forth. So you want to make maybe a lab experiment on these two to look at class performance, yeah? And then maybe you give them the very same test, This group of students, you may determine that they have covered, you first of all determine that they've all covered the topics which are going to be given. You give it to the students and put them in that class. The first and most important thing is, before you compare the two results, after you've received the results for both sides, for each group, get the average or the mean result, yeah? Now, if let's say in the high performing classroom, you have, let's say, some students scoring below 50, others just slightly above, then maybe one or two are in 90s. Then also the same side, you also have this side, the same thing, what we call that variance between the two groups. There's a high variance. That means the groups are not closely together. Like, let's say, for example, a lower variance, you would say you'd have 55, 56, 57, 60, 61, 72, like that. Their marks are close together, such that when you look at the curve in just one group, the numbers are close together. Do you get what I'm trying to say there? Let me actually pull out a paper which demonstrates that very, very well, what I mean by variance of one group in comparison to another. Let me just pull up a graph briefly. It was here. Okay, this is what I mean by variance. So here, this was a different example. This was an example showing humans versus Vulcans. Vulcans is a hypothetical alien race. What I mean by when you get the groups, each group, the results that come out, the numbers are close together. Yeah. In cases of humans here, they were trying to test IQ levels between humans and Vulcans. And the results, if the results of humans, even though their average is 100, but the entire group of humans, the test results showed they were close together in the same thing as the Vulcans. But when we have a huge variance is when you have the curve. That means you have, there are huge gaps between the different results that come out. Yeah? Do you get that point? You get what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what that basically means that your test subjects, you cannot even compare them because they probably have different levels, different IQ levels. They probably have other extenuating some circumstances. Maybe for one particular group, maybe let's look at the hypothetical case we found we've talked about the case of students. When you're testing maybe a private school, a group of students from a private school, you may have picked people with different IQ levels. You may have picked people who have different social challenges existing. Maybe you have one case of some students who are drug users that affects their performance. You have cases of students maybe who come from homes with maybe some domestic challenges at home, maybe people who are going through a divorce. Also on the other side, the same thing. Now that automatically is going to affect your test results. Do you get my point?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah, we do.
What that basically means that for you to attain systematic variance that you have in each test group, you make sure that they have the same conditions, very same. You try as much as possible to get people with the same conditions. So let us say, for example, you have a lab test, which is going to test maybe usability of a system, and you have two groups of people. You have two groups of people, maybe one which is the test group, the other which is a placebo. You get people with similar, if not the same, conditions that exist. So take an example. If I'm going to have a lab test, an experimental lab on a particular system to look at usability, my test groups, I would ensure that they have similar characteristics. For example, age, that is one. Two, similar levels of ICT literacy. Three, the same professional backgrounds. Yeah, similar or the same professional backgrounds. For example, if it is a system that maybe it is a gaming system or a gaming advert, a gaming app, it would be a little bit silly to get me, a 46-year-old, to be among the people to test its usability, because my age group automatically, I may not have interest in games. But you probably may want to look at people of a certain age group, people of a certain social background, and also you may also want to test mental capabilities. There are people who may be from a similar group, but maybe this person is a drug addict, is an alcoholic, this person can't participate. Then also you have to look at interests, yeah? Interests of the people. Someone may exist in a particular age group, but the person is not interested in gaming. So to try your level best to ensure that your test results are not interfered with, yeah? You see, quantitative research, unlike qualitative, you're not looking for all aspects. You're just looking for a particular aspect, yeah? It's a particular, probably you're looking at 2 or 3 variables. That's it. So if you have any external variant coming in, it's going to automatically dismantle your results. So far, have you got me on that?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. Then there is what we call, I'll still continue. I'll also upload this article because it's quite good at explaining some of these things. Let me move to the second one. The control variance. There's minimizing error and control variance. Let me see if I can just pull it out, the control variance. So now, here for the control variance, I gave you the example of one test, an engineer testing the performance of a Porsche to a Honda. Yeah. Now we know a Porsche these are high performance cars, and the Honda is in the category of the Toyotas. These are not high. These are what we call economical cars, normally used by people of a certain income level. Now, somebody trying to compare a Porsche to a Honda is not being fair. Or automatically, the results would be that this is more high performing than a Honda. But if a Porsche is being compared to a Ferrari, then the test results can be more authentic. So what we mean here is if you are testing, if you're carrying out that test, you must be fair in your comparison. Now imagine you're testing a system, yeah? Your performance of a system may be in comparison to another system. Let us say we are testing, the example actually given in this particular thing is web-based learning in comparison to the traditional physical classroom, yeah? In that particular case, we would have to test the exact same variables, the particular variables that the effectiveness on web-based learning that a student would pick from web-based learning in comparison to the physical classroom. Now, what would be the particular aspects of web-based learning that would bring out effective teaching and learning? What would be those aspects? You can't compare the two because physical classes and the web-based learning, these are two completely different contexts. Two completely different contexts. Number one, we would have to assume that all variables are controlled. For example, the learner has good internet access. The learner has got the necessary devices. The learner or the teacher also as well has every single resource available to him or her. Now, when you bring it to a physical classroom, it's also a different situation. There are those students who are disabled, who may not work very well on a web-based aspect. So basically what we are saying is, I think here somebody says it best. Here it says, what a researcher did is very similar to, very often educational research is comparison between, sorry, I'm trying to get, here they talked about once a series of studies were conducted to evaluate Daisy Quest, a computerized program used to teach phonemic awareness in grade K through I. The results were said to be positive, but in the studies, the control groups were not taught phonemic awareness at all. Yeah. Besides the design issue, there is a measurement issue associated with preceding problem. Slavin pointed out that developer-made tests are intended to assess the outcomes taught in the treatment program. So now what they are saying here is they wanted to prove that this particular program, they wanted to prove is actually effective at teaching phonemic awareness. But the control group, they said the control group, should I say, the placebo group had not received any phonemic awareness at all. So what we're saying is if you have two groups of people, ensure that the two groups of people have the same levels of qualifications and the same level, like what they know before you test should be equal. Yeah, the knowledge they come into the experimental test, their knowledge must be equal, their qualifications must be equal. What they need, the previous knowledge, each of them needs to be aware of, needs to come in needs to be the same. That when you carry out your experimental test, it really proves or disproves, yeah, that whether what you're testing, the phenomena you're testing adheres to your hypothesis or it doesn't. They also went ahead and gave another example of, let's look at a medical situation. And I think I gave an example of this in the video. When let us say you have a medical personnel who is trying to test the effectiveness of Covidex, if Covidex truly does heal or does help to cure the COVID-19 illness. But this particular person, you have two sets of people, two sets of groups of people, maybe they're infected with COVID-19. Now, the two sets of people may be one group, where you bring them together and one group you're giving them Covidex, the other group you're not. But here is another issue. In one group, in both groups, you have people who are infected with different variants of COVID-19. So we all know that different variants have different strength levels or different effects on the immune system. For example, Delta is quite strong as opposed to Omicron. So now if you have in different groups they have different variants, can you then say that the results you get from the test group and the placebo group or the control group, that they can truly be this valid results? I don't know if you've got my point up to there. You have two sets of people, but you actually haven't you haven't actually infected them with the same variant. So now if you're giving one group of people COVID-X, but in the other control group, you actually have people with Delta, and this test group has what we call maybe Omicron. Then at the end of it, you say, oh, we have proved that COVID-X can really cure. Those results would not be valid. First of all, both groups would need to have the same variant of COVID. Number two, the groups of people must also have the very same, let's say, physical makeup. They have the same, maybe they're in the same age group, that none of them have any underlying medical issues whatsoever. They should have the same nutritional, what they're eating should be the same. Yeah. Let's say if they're feeding all of them posho and beans, let it be posho and beans, so that we also not we don't say at any point, oh, that while they were there, some people were actually taking lemon and honey, which we all know are immune boosters. Or people actually taking things like they're all eating pineapples, which we all know help in fighting a virus. So in other words, what I'm saying is, this is where the control element comes in. That control element comes in. So I hope that point is got so far. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Then we come to reduced error. Yeah? So reduced error is when the experiment may be affected by other things that may come in. For example, in the example of COVID, we may have a situation where some people are taking, we're trying to test if COVID is effective, but you have people taking varying amounts. Their diet is varied. Some people are taking fruits, other people are just eating portion beans. Some people are taking this and things like that. Those are things that can bring in error. So you must make sure within your group you have controlled your group, you have the same conditions. Another thing that especially if it's not experimental, where you may find a situation where you may not be able to block, you may not be able, to remove all interfering variables. You create what they call blocks. So what they mean in this particular case, your subjects, you can test them at different times of the research. For example, if there are things that may be your results may be affected by mood swings. Maybe some of your respondents today, they may not be feeling so well. I may have quarreled with my sister or my husband, or somebody's wife has misbehaved or something like that. Now, what you do is, if you can't create a once in a lifetime situation where you control, you have blocks. Yeah, you have blocks where you test the groups at different times, so that you try to remove as much as possible what is referred to as uncontrollable noise. Yeah, you test the subject at different times, so that you try as much as possible to get rid of the noise, so that you find even the same group, you still get the same results, in spite of the fact that maybe on this particular day that the weather was hot, and maybe somebody with sinuses in that group, they failed to use the system properly. Or you find another situation that a person maybe was suffering from constipation, and when you sat them down to use a system or a particular app, they were unsettled. You try as much as possible to reduce those errors that may come in that are uncontrollable. Have you got my point so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the 3 ways we can try to validate quantitative research. Yeah. If you're attempting to use especially for ICT, for ICT or IS, if you're trying to use the qualitative research to prove or disprove something, an artifact, something like that, maybe be it experimental, whatever lab experiment. These are things that you may want to look at to try and validate your results. Yeah.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes, please.
Now, if you, for example, trying to validate maybe an experiment.
Yes.
For example, in a lab, are you supposed to go through all of them, or you can go with that, or maybe you employ like 2?
Now, I think primarily it depends on the kind of research that you're doing. Primarily it depends on the kind of research that you're doing and what question you want to answer. The most important thing you want to ensure with your results is that somebody sees them as valid. And you report this in your work. Yeah, you report this in your, if it is necessary to have a control variance, include it. Yeah. Let us say you're testing something as simple as usability. Now, in that particular situation, what is usable for a, let's say we're testing usability of a system in an academic environment, in an academic institution, okay? Now, we all know that in an academic institution, it's very possible to find a 70-year-old. Not so. As opposed to, let's say, in a banking institution. Is this true or false? Let me just, just give you an example. Let's say let me give you an example I think in all universities, all universities right now in Uganda have e-resources. And once they use the e-resources, they have certain applications that are introduced. And every single staff member should be able to use them. But you'll find a staff member who is 70 years old, 70, 72, so on and so forth, especially lecturers. This is normally the age of professors, a full-blown professor. You'll find them in that age group of 70 plus. Now, if you want to test that application, usability, the usability for a 70-year-old is not the same as a 30-year-old, okay? It's not the same. What you probably would do is you would categorize your lab experiments, where you would say, I'm going to test usability for this age group, and I'm going to test usability for, you divide your test subjects into groups, and you test for each of them, because you're not going to test the speed of a 70-year-old versus a 30-year-old. Yeah. The 70-year-old is willing to use the system. It's not about unwillingness, they're willing. For example, I have been in trainings. I've been in trainings for some of these systems, and you see a professor will definitely come in to attend this training, even though you see he or she is definitely in that age bracket of 65 and 70. They come, they want to participate, but their level of uptake is not the same as a 30-year-old, as a 40-year-old. level of uptake is different. Yeah. So if you want to test usability, you would divide those groups and you give the test results for each group. Yes, the 70-year-old may find it useful, but then it may take them a little bit longer to pick up than a 30-year-old. Therefore, you can say, because if you put them together, if you put these two groups together, and you find this group of people are much slower, you may end up putting out result that the system is not usable, because a certain percentage of users did not pick up in comparison to others. So what you would do is probably subdivide those groups. So now that is one scenario that I have given. So you'd have to think about age groups and things like that. So you try as much as possible. What I would advise is, as you're doing your research, try as much as possible to remove anything that may cause errors. If you perceive it, remove it. I'm seeing another question. Is the variance we are talking about related to mathematical variance? We also calculate in statistics. I'm not sure, because I'm not very good with quantitative research. I'd have to go back and look at it, then get back to you on that question. Okay, any other question? Do we have any other question?
I think let's move on, Doctor.
Okay. What else can we look at that was not clear? What else can we look at? One of the things, of course, we need to understand is that the two most popular methods that are quantitative in nature is experiment and survey. Yeah, survey research. These are the most popular. Yeah. So one of the things that we must ensure, is your instruments of measurement. These are key points. One of the things I can tell you I've seen, and I've also made that mistake, is when you have those scale measurements, agree, disagree, not sure, things like that. In some situations, those opinions may not make sense. So you need to be very, very careful as you're designing your questionnaire. This is a key point. You need to be very careful, and you need to pass it on to expert. Let your supervisor look at it. Get an expert to look at your questionnaire, because they can pick up some of these things immediately when you have a scale that is erroneous, that is going to pick wrong information for you. For example, there's a student I was supervising, and he didn't bother to show me his questionnaire. And he had a questionnaire where he was asking respondents about the availability of a computer lab. And you had respondents saying not sure. So I said, does that really make sense? Are you not aware whether there's a computer lab at your school? How can you not be aware? How would you classify? So that question was actually in a scale. So rather, the respondent should have asked, do you have a lab available at your institution? And even on top of that, because he was trying to test availability and improved performance, he should have already gone to schools which did have computer labs, not to schools which may or may not have, but a school which actually does have computer labs. Now, if it has computer labs, then the next question is it available to all students? And the students will say, we have one available. The students, you know, the lab is available, but is it available to you as an individual? Then the next question is, if the person says yes, have you ever used it to do an assignment, to do this, like that? So you realize already his instrument was wrongly designed. Yeah, a poorly designed measurement instrument, the instrument you're using to measure is poor. I don't know if my example makes sense.
It does, Doctor.
Yeah, then there are errors which come from the test subjects themselves, especially if they don't understand the question very well, and their response comes out like we said, the example of maybe the knowledge of the person is insufficient. Like the person needs to have some kind of background knowledge to what it's the phenomena you're trying to research about. Contextual knowledge, where you have noise coming in. Maybe today there is noise going on outside as the research and experimental research is going on. Maybe I have something going on in my life as a respondent, and I end up giving inaccurate information. I just want to hurry up and do something. So those are some of the things that we think about. So survey your surveys that you're designing. Please make sure that you test them, you give them to an expert, give them to somebody, then have a pilot study where you try to test your instrument against a small group of people to see if you can actually get results that you need. So those are a few things that I would point out. Okay, let's then briefly look at the qualitative side. So one of the ways we can, first of all, try to, because in qualitative, one of the key things about qualitative research is generalizing your data, trying to generalize your data, because you're looking at a small, usually our area of study is quite small. The only thing is we go in depth, we go deep with our findings. You saw with Emmanuel, we talked about you can have videos, you can have recording, you can have pictures. Your information is rich as compared to the quantitative side, which is quite flat. You have maybe only a survey or a lab experiment. Your information is quite rich. One of the ways we can generalize is to have multiple cases. Yeah, we talked about this previous in our first class, over the weekend, where you can have multiple cases. And if you have the same variables coming out, then you can say most likely in contexts, in this particular context, this variable exists in several contexts. That gives you room to generalize. Yeah. 2 is triangulation. Yeah. When you gather using multiple sampling strategies. When you have more than one person carrying out observation in the field, where you might have research assistants and see if you all observe the same thing. Then there's using multiple data types. And this is when you have observation, you have videos, so on and so forth. Then also using several methods, 2 or more methods in your research, where you say, I'm going to use case study, I'm going to use ethnography, I'm going to use this, so that you see if all methods will help you and pull out the same thing. So those are things that can help us generalize. Yeah. So unlike the two approaches are quite different in nature. So the things that come out, what comes out are two completely differing things. One has a statistical view, this other has a narrative view, and it brings out several dynamics. This one may bring out only one perspective, one dimension of a particular phenomena. And they all have different ways of trying to validate your findings. Do we have any questions so far?
Hello. So my question might be a bit unrelated.
Okay.
Might not be directly talking about what you're saying right now.
Yeah.
But as I took time and I was pondering on qualitative research.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to think that because of its depth and everything that you need to carry out, I feel, okay, this is just what I feel. I feel that formulating a problem statement might be much harder than the quantitative side.
Formulating a research problem itself, eh?
Yeah.
Now, formulating the research problem actually more or less depends on your literature review. The literature review part is what guides your research problem. So the research problem, in other words, for you to come up with a good research problem, you must have read, you must have read widely into your research area, and you can prove from literature the existence of a particular problem. I don't know if you get my point there.
I do.
Yeah. So the research problem, the research problem stems from literature. The literature must have pointed out the existence of this problem, whether it is qualitative or quantitative. So that is a key point. Whether the problem is, you're going to approach it on a quantitative side, or from a quantitative perspective, or from a qualitative perspective. Now, if you find yourself asking a question, questions like what, how, that question, if you find the question itself guides you on whether your research is qualitative or quantitative. If you find yourself posing a question that is seeking a causal relationship, that's a quantitative question. Does this affect this? Does this cause this? If you're asking such a question, then your research is quantitative. If you're asking a question like, what are the effects? What are the effects of using blah, 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 blah? That's a qualitative question because it's descriptive in nature. If you're asking a question like, what exists in a particular context to support this ABCD? That's a qualitative question. So the question itself, if you find yourself asking a particular question, questions like what, how, questions that are seeking to understand to know, to find out, maybe to discover. They may just pull out, we're actually preempting our next lecture when I do that. If you go to Moodle, go to formulating of research problems. And there are several articles there that I have put up. Look at this. You can start with this first one. Let me just open it up. Yeah, this was an article I found I think which journal was that? I forget the journal. Let me look at just some questions, some things. So if it's qualitative in nature, if it's trying to discover, seek to understand, they even actually point out which methods, things that are seeking to understand, to explore a process. Yeah. If you're looking at a question that is looking at the effect, the influence of one thing over the other, the impact of this to determine the cause, the relation, that is a quantitative research. When it's qualitative, you have an open-ended question. So the central question may start with how or what? How or what? Because that is seeking for a story, a narrative. Just look at some of these things and you'll see, I think there even should be some example. How do early adolescent females read literature that falls outside the realm of fiction? How do they? You're seeking a description of something. That is qualitative research. Yeah. How do women in a psychological doctoral program describe their decision to return to school? How do women, see all these questions, is the how, the what. That question is typically a qualitative research. Does the dash name that explain the relationship between this and this, controlling for the effects of this, that is typically quantitative. Does this, it is seeking to give a yes or no. Do you see that the difference between qualitative and quantitative? The others seek a narration. Sorry, Manuel, your network is a bit shaky.
I can see the difference. Or maybe my follow-up question would be that what is
Sorry?
okay, I just wanted to know, is there, let's say, standard, for example, for master's class, number of pages or a thesis should look like?
Yes, that's a good one. For master's thesis, I think minimum number of pages should be 75. Minimum. Did I answer your question, Emmanuel?
Clear enough. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome. Any other question? Do you have any other question? No? We are okay?
For now, no.
For now, no. Okay. Okay, just what I would then suggest is go on Moodle, read through these articles on research problem, so that on Friday we start with formulation of research questions specifically on the qualitative side, and then on Saturday we look at the quantitative side. Hopefully we'll finish, we can, after the qualitative side, because some of you had created some research questions, yeah? We can have a discussion on the two, both on Friday and Saturday. We look at some few of those and we try to critique. Yeah. What I'm going to do is open up a discussion forum in this section, in this particular section, research design.
Madam, just excuse me a little bit.
Yes, please.
Just a little bit.
Yes,
So,
please.
you're asking about research questions. I thought what we needed to come up with first is
A research problem. Is that what you are saying?
problem
Madam?
statement.
Yeah. Now,
Yes,
the
I
reason
thought that is
the reason why I'm asking is I'm talking about it because somebody mentioned in the Saturday class that some people already had some research questions. They wanted us to just look at them and critique them. But there's going to be an assignment after Saturday in groups where you're going to formulate a research problem and research questions or hypotheses. That will be an assignment, but for Friday and Saturday, it's just for those members because some people mentioned it to me in the previous class, in the Saturday class that they had already started formulating some research questions, and therefore they wanted to see if it is a good research question or a bad one. So we're just simply going to look at some of the basic principles which you shall of what is a good research question, what is a bad research question. If it's too broad or too narrow, things like that, without necessarily looking at the problem.
most
but
important part.
Yeah, just looking at
Right.
the basic principles.
Okay.
Yeah. But you'll have a group assignment where you'll be formulating a research, where you'll pull out a research area with a research problem and then come up with a research question, sub-questions, or hypothesis, depending on the type of research you perceive you want to do. So far, are we okay?
I think we are.
Okay. So it's just 30 minutes to 9. I was thinking maybe we end here. We start again on Friday on research problems, on a research problem. Then the last thing we shall have will be on data analysis. So shall we end here? I'm going to put up a discussion forum on Moodle where some of those who do have research questions, you may post your research question so that we can begin to think about them before the lecture of Friday and Saturday. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Fine, Doctor.
Okay.